Hello and welcome to the DSP Leaders World Forum 2021. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content at TelecomTV, and coming up now is our Solutions and Strategies Roundtable, where we'll be discussing the role of Edge as a driver of new service revenues. Now, there are plenty of research studies that value the Telco Edge service revenue opportunity at multiple billions of dollars. There's no denying its promise, but how do telcos realize this potential? Are vertical services a viable choice, or are telcos better off focusing on horizontal edge services? Does it have unique attributes, or is the edge just a locally extended cloud? Well, let's find out what our special guests think, and I'm delighted to introduce Francesca Serravalle, who is Emerging Technology Director at Colt, Sergio Gonzalez, who is Cloud Architect at Microsoft, Diego Lopez, Senior Technology Expert at Telefónica, Beth Cohn, SDN Product Strategies at Verizon, and Obi Egonu, who is Director of Global Service Provider Solutions Engineering at Worldwide Technology. Hello everyone, good to see you all. Thank you for taking part in this roundtable. Now, we put together a number of discussion points based on input from our TelecomTV viewers. So let's get straight to the first one, and that is, so what if telcos control vast numbers of connected edge locations? They're not the only ones, and so they shouldn't assume that this automatically leads to new business revenue lines. Beth, we've been discussing edge for a long time now. Is it a given that edge equates to new telco revenues?
I believe it does, and I actually disagree with the statement that others control those edges. It's true that there are suites of software that are at the edge. However, the only companies that reach the edge are the telcos. So I know the hyperscalers have been trying to get to the edge. I think they're struggling with it. And I think that there is actually revenues to be had and found that go beyond what we're already offering. As you may be aware, Verizon launched Application Edge in November, which is a package of the capability for customers to stand up applications at the edge and manage them centrally. It is not a traditional application, it's not a traditional telco network focused service. It's really focused on customers' applications. And as we move into 5G and IoT and other types of these edge applications, we are seeing more and more demands from our customers to provide those services within our ecosystem.
Thanks, Beth. Diego, operators do have a substantial physical asset base in key locations, don't they?
Yes, and I think that is independently of what you may think in this world of progressive virtualization. This at the end is important, especially if we consider that for the edge and which are the requirements in terms of latency or other properties that are desirable, like, for example, data not abandoning a particular domain or security regulations of any type, or regulations or requirements. It is important as well. One thing that we tend to forget, and is precisely is that the telco culture has some advantages, in despite of what is I would say the common belief right now. And one of those common advantages is precisely that in the telco environment we are used to what I would call radical openness. You have is that you are obliged since the beginning, and because of tradition and regulations, to interoperate with all your competitors. This is something that I believe is very important when we are talking about precisely trying to move towards pervasive communication-based services, like is the case of the edge. And I believe in that respect, there is an advantage, a clear advantage, and there is a clear good opportunity for telcos in this space.
Thank you. Francesca, do telcos have a clear advantage here in your opinion? Does the fact that the telcos possess these assets, key assets in key locations, automatically lead to new revenue opportunities?
Yes, I think it's fair to say that edge location are an important asset. And they are an important asset because there is a trend towards distributed architecture across all layers: distributed application, distributed security, distributed intelligence, and distributed connectivity. So having a network which is edge-centric that enable a distributed infrastructure and flexible topology across all layers is important. But I think to really enable and extrapolate value from the edge location, it's really important to wrap it up the right business model. And there are many use cases. One use case could be enabling distributed telco cloud, giving the opportunity through a digital marketplace and a portal to our customer to provision network resources and network function wherever they want. Or maybe we could really bring in a broader partner ecosystem and enable innovative B2B proposition for verticals and IoT services. So I think, yes, edge location are an important asset, but it's really important to define the right business model.
Thank you. And Obi, you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, so I think to an extent it's a true statement, and it's one in which service providers need to take a page from history books and learn from. For example, in prior years where they made all these infrastructure investments, for example, in 4G, only for over-the-top players to take advantage and utilize and monetize at the same time. But to Beth's point earlier, with the rollout of 5G networks as we're seeing today, SPs or telcos have an opportunity to transform that network edge into a horizontal services platform that essentially opens up new lines of business revenue by delivering services or application services to the network edge. And essentially, they need to work very closely with that partner ecosystem. So in this instance, it could be ISVs, it could be NEPs, it could even be the hyperscale cloud providers to deliver these services. Because at the end of the day, they're going to be accelerating the digital transformation initiatives of their end enterprise customers.
Thank you. And Sergio, the assets are there, but what we're hearing is that in order to realize these revenues, partnership is still essential.
Yeah, exactly. So the edge is not a real estate business. So certainly you have an advantage by having all those locations, but I agree on what has been said so far. You need to create a connected ecosystem. Reason being is that the use cases that are brought, that are enabled by the edge, are very transformative use cases. So you really need the right set of partners that allow you to conquer those spaces. So yes, you have an advantage by having those locations, but that on itself is not enough in order to be successful. So you need to become a network platform. And when you say platform, you're really opening up an environment for others to deliver connected services on top of your infrastructure, your networks, and your edge locations.
Okay, thank you, Sergio. Well, let's move on to our next point that was raised by our viewers. I would say it's a contentious point, this one. Francesca, maybe I can ask you this one first. And that is, focusing on edge as a service is somewhat dangerous and short-term because edge is simply distributed cloud.
Well, first of all, I think it's not just distributed cloud; it's more than that. But let's focus on the distributed cloud use case. I think there is still synergy and value to get out of this use case. And it's true that hyperscaler, they are coming up with their own solution. Think on Outpost from AWS, the Azure stack, but the telco can bring in some more value. We can enable reach, for example, because we are more pervasive into the customer premises, or we can also fill in the gap in terms of deployment scenario because the hyperscaler distributed cloud doesn't scale down below a certain site, really. And again, talking about bringing in the partner ecosystem, I think there is an opportunity to bundle the distributed cloud stack, especially if it is a software-driven stack, like, for example, take the IBM satellites, with other capability from the ICT stack and from the broader partner ecosystem. So yeah, I think there is some positioning strategy and positioning work to do, but there is still some synergy development initiative to explore.
Thank you. Beth, what about this issue of the edge as an entity in its own right? It's something we're talking about now, but is this likely to maybe go away as the years go by?
That's been a philosophical question that I think the edge community and the cloud community and the telco community have been wrestling with for a number of years now. So I feel that the edge is in some ways a superset of the cloud, or rather the cloud is a subset of the edge, but there are some unique capabilities that I think many of the hyperscalers are struggling with and the telcos are very comfortable with. And I know Obi mentioned this, or Diego mentioned this earlier. The telcos are very comfortable with being at the edge. We have been at the edge for decades, if you think about it, because we're running a distributed network of applications, and they've been network applications, but there always have been non-network components, billing applications, etc. So it's not too much of a stretch for the telcos to incorporate these newer elements. But I think it is a stretch for the hyperscalers because the hyperscalers started in that data center-centric view of the world. So I think that they have been struggling with how do we reach out to the edge, how do we get to the edge, and how do we service the edge. And I think that's where the synergy really comes between the telcos and the hyperscalers.
Okay, Sergio, we seem to have a sweet spot. The edge becomes a sweet spot. We're saying that the telcos have their historical strengths at the edge of their network there, and a lot of the big public cloud providers maybe have a problem with scaling down.
Well, certainly in our strategy, we see the telco as a key partner in order to deliver edge-enabled services. In essence, I see two types of, mainly two families of services that a telco can deliver. Those are the ones that are enabling third-party services with enhanced connected capabilities, or using hyperscale building blocks in order to deliver end customer services with enhanced technology capabilities. In both cases, what you require is a high quality and dynamic network that you can control, in which you can control network quality and network quality of service through software driven APIs. And in that case, there is a transformation need. Operators need to enable API driven networks that are able to expose quality of service and quality of connectivity for any kind of edge connected scenarios. But certainly we really see at Microsoft the edge, the winning at the edge as a perfect binomial between us and the telco operators, and we are moving in that approach.
Thank you, Sergio. Unless you have any other comments from our guests on this point, I think we'll move on. Right, shall we move on to the next viewer point? And this is an angle we're starting to hear on TelecomTV, and that is the edge will only deliver new revenues if telcos adopt an app store kind of approach and rely on percentage of third party or partner sales. This whole idea of kind of mimicking what we're seeing on the consumer world of app stores, bringing that into the edge. As I say, it's something we're only just starting to hear within the community, but do we think it's a viable approach? Diego, what do you think of this?
Well, I think that some degree of collaboration and that the idea that this is not only, this idea that the edge is mine, the cloud is theirs, and then we are going to compete for see which application runs where, is not the right approach. Is having the possibility of making agreements with third parties that are distributing applications that run on the edge and are able to run on the cloud as well is something that is important. Whether it's going to be precisely the App Store model in which independent companies are uploading things and people in a completely disintermediated way are acquiring the access, etc. I'm not that sure that would be the case. I know that app stores, and this is something that I have heard several times since I joined Telefónica about that the SDN and NFV and Edge and Telco Clouds and Open RAN and whatever would bring this app store approach, because it's supposed to be, it's supposed to be the golden egg for everything. For sure, a degree of collaboration and a certain amount of precisely open APIs and ways of enabling the collaboration, the horizontal collaboration among different edge providers, and the vertical collaboration with cloud providers as well would be necessary, and a more agile way of interacting with customers for sure. Whether we can call it an app store or a more dynamic service portfolio is something that remains to be seen, I'd say.
Thanks. Francesca, what do you think of this whole idea of the App Store for the edge?
I think it's very important. I think it's important that, for example, the telco have a digital marketplace, a VNF marketplace that gives the possibility to the customer to really spin off network services. At the network edge could be, for example, a multi-cloud gateway to enable multi-cloud connectivity, or a virtual security firewall to enhance the security posture, for example, or an SD-WAN at the customer premises. That will enable the distributed telco cloud. But if we want to move from a UCP model to an edge proposition that can also host network workload, but also IT workload, then working with, for example, SIs who can bring in the application portfolio and the ISV marketplace is important. And if you want to go one step further and leveraging the marketplace of cloud, who now have 5G as a services and their cloud stack, that really enable us to use the edge platform as a platform for transformation, for innovation, for B2B, where the edge can enable anything as a services, from real infrastructure as a services, 5G as a services, network as a services, intelligence as a services, and the distributed cloud.
Thank you. Obi, this App Store or Marketplace, as we perhaps used to call it, and there's various names and connotations here, it takes the whole idea of an ecosystem to a new level, I guess.
Yeah, no, I actually like that question, because it sort of underscores the point I made earlier about, creating a partner ecosystem that telcos can essentially deliver, new revenue streams from. But essentially, the way I see it, right? So hypercloud, or rather hyperscale cloud providers, have built this, developer-friendly ecosystems and software stacks that are focused on self-service, or what you would call the App Store or the marketplace. They've been able to empower developers to build, automate, and then scale out these application deployments, often through integration or open APIs, kind of to the point that Sergio brought up earlier. But what you want to see is telcos that effectively want to compete or partner with these hyperscale cloud providers need to be able to, to accept or employ the same approach by providing similar features or functionality. Because at the end of the day, this app store or marketplace approach is what will drive innovation. And at the same time, like I said previously, create these new revenue streams that these telcos or service providers can tap into.
Thank you, Obi. Any of the other guests want to comment on this one? Beth?
Oh, I do definitely want to. So I think when we say app stores or marketplace, we tend to think of the consumer market where you're downloading Candy Crush or some pretty simplistic little app, and at the business and the enterprise level, the app stores are far more sophisticated, and we're pulling, like Francesca said, we're pulling the components, the SD-WAN components, the network components, and the applications and putting them together. And that's a far harder conversation, far harder technical problem to solve. And we're seeing, just the connectivity between the network services, the NFVs, and the underlying transport. That's a problem that the telcos are uniquely situated to solve and need to solve to support those applications. Particularly SD-WAN, of course, which is focused on, application-aware networks. And, unfortunately, the networks, the applications are not network aware. And I think that's a gap in the solutions that I would love to see going forward be solved.
Thank you. And Sergio, it's a story we're hearing a lot at the moment. Open up to new partners and companies, encourage the innovation. That then leads to increased service revenues for all.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think it is mandatory to go into. I don't think that the marketplace model is the only way to generate revenue, but certainly putting in place the capabilities on the network that are required for a marketplace are a must. So somehow I see future scenarios in which operators move from connectivity to connected services. So you don't connect cars, you deliver a connected car experience. So that can be a first party service delivered by the operator, or other scenarios in which the network is just a mediator for a third party to deliver a service on top. In both cases, you really need the capabilities in place that are required for a marketplace experience. So in essence, what we see, for example, is that onboarding IoT connectivity is quite complex. You need logistics of SIM cards, many APIs to provision. They are not uniform across operators, so we need to fix that. And certainly how you access to network quality of service, that also should be disintermediated and facilitated. When you do that, certainly you can enable that marketplace experience that allows you to build your own first-party connected experience services or third-party services on top.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Next observation from our viewers, and that is that developing winning managed private network service strategies is the key to Edge success for telcos. Diego, do you think that managed private network services is the most important route forward?
Well, Beth was mentioning SD-WAN, and for sure the capability of making networks as much flexible, programmable, whatever you call it, at the same time, by customers and by operators themselves. Because right now, one of the problems that we have is managing our own networks is extremely overly complex. And exposing the capabilities of the network to both the users that are running the applications and the developers that are preparing the application in a consistent way. So we have something that is, we said, developers friendly, and this is key for allowing the creation of precisely an ecosystem of developers that are willing to develop on top of the edge, and that are willing to produce applications that are good enough for users to run on the edge. What is important here is that this, for sure, this is, if you call it a managed private network, that's fine. But at the end, it's about precisely exposing network capabilities and providing the ability of using those capabilities in a consistent and open way. And finally, something that is very important is in the moment you allow that, and we're talking about critical infrastructures and things that are extremely needs to be really dependable, and look at the recent experience with the virus and all the like. What comes with this is a really a strong move towards guaranteeing security, privacy, and accountability.
Thank you. Francesca, as Diego says, managing our own networks is incredibly difficult. So, is this a route forward for Edge services?
Well, first of all, I think that's why it's important to have intelligence operation. And we are all, I guess we all agree that having AI pervasive in the network management function, being, performance management, security management, fault management is key to enable real self-organized networks, but also to enable our customer to create the right overlay based on the specific application. And we all know that as we go towards enabling digital transformation of verticals, we are going to have to comply and deliver diversified SLA. So having a service-driven networks that enable customer to really provision network resources and network function whenever they need is really important. So this is from the one side, but I think the managed private networks also applies in the land side, and we're seeing that thanks to innovative spectrum policies, now the 5G private networks are taking off, which means 5G is becoming very pervasive in the operational and technology layer of verticals, enabling use cases like digital twin or real-time process analysis. Now, to unleash the power of 5G private networks, we need AI, which will probably sit on the cloud to really extrapolate the intelligence from the data that are generated from by 5G private networks and deliver actionable insights. And the one, will be able to connect those 5G private networks to the intelligence that sits in the cloud. And as I say, it's really important to have an intelligent operation that is able to deliver an overlay in line with some specific AI application. So I see it's a very valid point from the LAN side and the WAN side.
Thank you. And Obi, this the whole idea of managed private network services seems to play to telco's strengths. Is this something that really could be a key to Edge success?
So I wouldn't necessarily say it's a key to Edge success. How I would describe it is it builds on the strategy for success. So Sergio sort of alluded to this earlier. So telcos have long had dedicated organizations that are focused or essentially cater to enterprise needs. Although typically they seem to focus more on enterprise mobility or SD-WAN type solutions. But now, despite the promise of private networks, enterprises have obviously, struggled to embrace the concept of managing their own network or having their own dedicated network to be able to, address their own set of key requirements. And at the same time, telcos have also, struggled to keep pace with the technology transition that sort of accelerate that digital transformation that enterprises are clamoring for. So then what you end up seeing is telcos today are starting to look very closely, into providing managed services capabilities where they can offer some sort of combination of a licensed spectrum along with a sort of network slice or network equipment that potentially carves out a portion of their edge infrastructure as a managed service. And the way I see it again is these managed service offerings can help telcos, stay relevant and at the same time create a stickiness or persistent relationship with their enterprise end customers.
Thank you. And Beth, you brought up SD-WAN earlier in our conversation. Any thoughts on this?
So, SD-WAN was originally presented as the MPLS killer. We haven't seen that at all, of course. So, yes, we do see customers that are switching to SD-WAN as their primary network. We're also seeing a lot of pressure for our enterprise customers are pushing that envelope into LTE primary and of course with the coming 5G rollout, 5G primary. But there is definitely still a need for private networks, particularly in the data sensitive arena. I don't see the financial services companies giving up the advantages of private networks anytime soon. Absolutely, SD-WAN can cover many of the advantages of the private networks, but not all of them. So, any kind of public network is going to be a best effort delivery method, no matter what. And so, many companies use the private networks to get past that and really allow them to tune their applications or tune their networks to really meet their specific application requirements. Yes, SD-WAN can do that, but in combination, it's actually even a better solution for many of these customers.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We've just got time for a final talking point from our audience, and I think this last one comes from the fact that there's still a lot of people struggling to identify the use cases that are going to prove to be the most profitable for telcos and successful for telcos. And this is, service providers should stop focusing on low latency as a key criterion for edge success. Diego, do you think there's been maybe too much focus on low latency? I mean, you see every month there's some autonomous vehicle type story that comes to the fore.
Indeed, I think that this is something that is like in general. I remember when we started working in this, general networking, people were basically obsessed with bandwidth. It was bandwidth and bandwidth and bandwidth, and the more, well, by that moment, I'm old enough to remember the days of the kilobits, not even before we reached the megabits and the gigs, etc. Simply bandwidth is not simply bandwidth is not the solution. Simply reducing latency is not the issue in many cases. I believe that there are other aspects that are equally important. As I said before, for example, about restricting the limit of where you are distributing your data, that is connected with security and privacy, is about the control loop when you are applying AI or whatever other evidence-based management, is that the control loop is aware enough of the local conditions and doesn't receive everything aggregated upwards. And what is important as well is something that I believe is something that is going to happen in sometimes in the future, is the idea that you would be able to operate a continuum of services that will be self-adapting depending on your requirements. Among them, latency for sure. So you would not be, or the user would not be concerned whether it's a central cloud run by a hyperscaler, whatever it is, providing the service, or for whatever the reason those services are following the user or approaching the user because there are additional requirements or is overload on the network or whatever. I believe that latency is latency is the most direct example, because it's the first thing that when you look at it, you think that is going to solve it, but it's not going to be the only one. And what is more important, we are just starting. And my experience, and I guess the experience of all of us, it has been that when it comes to this kind of new network paradigms, etc., is always surprising. You're always surprised by the kind of services that are built. And I always use the same example because it was the most amazing one. It was the explosion of the SMS usage when it was not intended to be like that, or the massive usage of video on mobile phones. And we still have to see what comes from in terms of a new service that will become the killer application. The important thing is that we are ready. We have, as I said before, platforms open enough vertically and horizontally to support those services.
Thank you, Diego. And Francesca, do you think low latency will prove to be the killer use case, or is this just going to be one factor in many?
It's going to be one factor in many from our side. It's really use case dependent. For example, at Colt, we are running a POC, which is a smart building POC, where we bundle connectivity, Colt Edge, with an IoT platform from DSI. And in this case, it's not really latency sensitive. The edge will be used to aggregate the data, to host some virtual network function. Those data will then be sent to the cloud, where a smart facility dashboard will consume, will ingest, will analyze and then visualize actionable insights. Different is the case where we are doing co-innovating with a customer of ours and proving the office of the futures and capability like video analytics platform for smart occupancies and AR and VR based collaboration. In this case, is latency sensitive. So it really depends on the use case. There is another use case where we are collaborating with a hyperscaler to enable hybrid cloud migration, where our Colt Edge platform can host a Kubernetes platform and enable containerized workload, whether it's a network workload or IT workload. So I think it really depends on the use case.
Thank you. And Sergio, what's your opinion on low latency as key to edge success?
Basically, I would basically agree with what Diego said. Latency is key, but you shouldn't focus on that as the single ingredient. In essence, you don't know what's going to happen. With 5G. You try to tackle new use cases, new scenarios that weren't tackled before. So you should let the revolution surprise you. And in order to go there, you need to enable your network with proper APIs. So you let the killer application use case arise. So in essence, it's more on automating your processes, enabling connected capabilities through APIs as a complement to latency, that just latency on its own.
Thank you. And Obi, we know full well in the telecoms industry the dangers of trying to pick the major, most important use case ahead of actually deploying all the technology. What's your view on low latency?
So I think I look at it from a different perspective, and it's primarily one that's centered around driving business value, right? So if telcos can look at it from that lens of how can we essentially drive business value to our end customers, it'll be a better approach. So I think, it's a first statement to say, SP should look beyond just being fixated on low latency as a key, criterion for edge success. However, it's hard to argue that, low latency, high performance, or even faster connectivity aren't necessarily the foundation for edge success. And by that, I mean, it essentially serves as an enabler for a host of use cases, like Francesca had highlighted earlier. And then these use cases, can be delivered by the telcos to be able to monetize their edge infrastructure investments. So if you think, for example, of organizations, like retailers, like transportation companies, that are managing, fleets of vehicles, or even manufacturers that are relying on, a massive amount of IoT devices or IoT sensors, there's an opportunity out there for these enterprises to modernize their processes and deliver, new experiences with using cloud capabilities at the edge. So, just to wrap up, obviously by leveraging with these enterprises leveraging the existing edge deployments by telcos and their own end partners, they're able to optimize latency. They're able to lower processing costs by essentially processing these data at the edge. And also lowering, the compute cycles if they're processing it at the edge. The other item to also highlight is data storage, right? So these times they're able to actually do data analytics right there at the edge as opposed to sending all the way back to the core. There are benefits abound. So you shouldn't necessarily have telcos being fixated on latency, but looking beyond that to identify how they can, again, drive business value with their end customers.
Thank you, Obi. And Beth, final comment to you for today's roundtable discussion about low latency as a key enabler for edge success.
Yeah, I would say the telcos have been pushing low latency as the key driver, but it's, as the others have said, it's just one of many. And in fact, there's many edge applications that do not require latency at all. There's a lot of store and forward type applications where latency is of little interest. So I think that the idea that low latency is everything is just a telco centric view of things, and it really is the way I view it is we need to put the processing and the application in the place in the network that makes the most sense from the perspective of the performance to the end user or the end device, or whatever is consuming that application needs to have the right level of performance, whether that needs to be low latency or local processing or high throughput, whatever the criteria are, that's what needs to drive it. It's not just low latency.
Thank you very much, Beth. And with that, we have to draw our discussion to a close. Thank you all very much for participating and sharing your views and opinions. Now, if you're watching this on day 5, the final day of our DSP Leaders World Forum, then don't forget to send us any questions you have on this subject, and we'll try and answer them in our live after-show program later today. Otherwise, please take a look at all the sessions from this year's World Forum. They're all now available for on-demand viewing. Today's been focused on DSP revenue streams, but we've covered 4 other important topics as part of this year's event. And that is almost the end of this year's event. We have one more after-show party still to come, where I'm joined live by Ray Lemaitre and a host of guests. So please join us later today and get in touch with us, because we really want to know what you thought of our 3rd DSP Leaders World Forum, and also what you'd like to see us cover in the future. For now though, thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.